to follow up on the phone call the president had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication.
Elon Musk has been tasked with overseeing Doge on behalf of the president, and Doge employees, Doge folks have been onboarding at respective agencies.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul says she is considering removing New York City Mayor Eric Adams from office amid the legal fallout surrounding his corruption case.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in New York. Tonight on America Decides, Musk's role. We have been told, this was from the White House, that he was a temporary employee, that is to say Elon Musk, on duty for about 6 months, special executive employee. His mission, under that description, run the Department of Government Efficiency, cut staff at the federal level, and if possible, save taxpayer money. However, court filings last night have revealed more details about the billionaire's role in the Trump administration, leaving these questions. How much influence and for how long will Elon Musk be either at Doge or advising the president on Doge-related issues? Also, Ukraine war talks. The U.S. and Russia agree to 4 principles, broad principles, outlining negotiations and the path forward. They did this in Saudi Arabia. Many agree Russia needs to be at the table as the aggressor in this war. But where is Europe? And more specifically, where is Ukraine in all this? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says, plainly, he wasn't invited. Here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio on those talks.
The comment I would have on that is that for 3.5 years while this conflict has raged, or 3 years while it's raged, no one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today, because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can.
Concerns and resignations. This is a big story here in New York. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said she met today with, quote, key leaders in Manhattan. This as she signaled that she may use unusual powers in her possession to force fellow Democrat New York City Mayor Eric Adams from office. But first, President Trump at Mar-a-Lago signed some executive orders and took many questions from the press. I want to start tonight with Nancy Cordes, who joins us once again from West Palm Beach, Florida. And Nancy, lots of issues discussed, but for those most interested in the future of Ukraine, U.S. relations with Russia, and how that may be resolved, what the president said today stood out dramatically.
That's right. He had some disparaging remarks to make about the leader of Ukraine. He said that he should have ended this war himself a long time ago. Unclear how Ukraine could have done that when it was invaded unprovoked by Russia. But that's what the president said nonetheless. He argued that Zelensky has no choice but to come to the table now because his approval rating has dropped to 4%, which is not true, Major. His approval rating is about 50%. Any quick Google search could tell you that. So yet again, another piece of incorrect information from the president about this conflict. And he talked about wanting to end the barbarism in Ukraine. He said Russia wants to end the barbarism there without noting that it was Russia's barbarism that created this situation in the first place. So a lot for Ukrainians to be concerned about, if they weren't already, that this president is going into these negotiations with a friendlier eye towards the Russians and what they want to get out of the talks than what the Ukrainians are looking to get out of the talks. Whether or not that will end up being the case remains to be seen. But certainly there was nothing there in his remarks to reporters here in Palm Beach to assuage the concerns, the mounting concerns that have been expressed by U.S. allies in Europe and the Ukrainians themselves.
And as you indicated, Nancy, it's possible that there could be some other strategy here. Go soft at the beginning, hard at the end. It's possible. But one of the things that concerns everyone in the Russian government, Vladimir Putin specifically, is the allegation, verified on the ground by independent researchers, that war crimes have been committed against Ukraine. And the glossing over, the sanitizing of that fact, that set of facts that indicate war crimes were committed against civilians, intentionally targeted by the Russians, in many ways either on the ground or from the air, and the sort of sense that that's not even an issue, is something, regardless of where these negotiations end up, is a very key interest to the Russians. So in that context alone, what the president isn't saying may matter as much as what he is saying.
Right, and The Art of the Deal, that classic tome that was written by the president himself would argue that you go into any negotiation with the strongest hand possible, that you don't give your leverage over before you even start talking. So what has caused such great concern for the Ukrainians is either the president or some of his top officials, top cabinet secretaries, saying things like NATO membership is not going to be in the cards for Ukraine coming out of these negotiations, or saying Ukraine is not going to go back to its original borders. It's going to have to give up some territory. That may all be true, but a traditional approach to negotiations in the style that was laid out in The Art of the Deal would say you don't basically give away those pieces of leverage before you even begin talking.
You hold your cards under the art of the deal much closer to your vest than has so far been demonstrated. Nancy Cordes in West Palm Beach, thank you very, very much. The White House, as we indicated at the top, is sending what can only be described as mixed signals about who is actually running the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. A court filing late last night said that Elon Musk is not technically part of Doge and actually serves as a senior advisor to the president, which means he may serve in that role longer than originally articulated by the White House, which suggested it would be about a term of employment roughly 6 months. The White House press secretary was asked about this earlier today.
Elon Musk has been tasked with overseeing Doge on behalf of the president, and Doge employees, Doge folks have been onboarding at respective agencies across our federal bureaucracy as political appointees, just like any other political appointee gets on board with the new administration with the changing of hands.
Jake Rosen joins us now from our D.C. bureau. Jake, help the audience make sense of what this legal filing says and suggests about not only what Elon Musk's role is, what the duration of it might be.
Right. This filing came late last night in a case that was actually decided further on earlier today, in which the government laid out via an affidavit from someone who works in the executive branch of the White House, basically an administrative staffer, who said that Elon Musk is just that, a senior White House advisor. They compared him to Anita Dunn, who worked under President Biden as kind of oversaw many buckets of government and many buckets of management within the White House. They said that he has no formal administrative role over Doge. He has no formal administrative role over any part of what they're doing there, and is certainly not the head of it. This came because there's a lawsuit by over 18 states' attorney general, all liberal, who sued the federal government, including Elon Musk, in his capacity as what they thought was head of Doge and the Department of Government Efficiency, alleging that Elon Musk's role is unconstitutional. Now, obviously, this helped defend Elon Musk in this by basically saying it's not actually him, it's just a separate department in the government, and Musk is an advisor to the president. However, that does contradict really what we saw last week in the Oval Office between Trump and Elon Musk when Musk was there with his child, and they had that very contentious and controversial kind of press engagement, but really it stemmed from a lot of that.
And there's also this evolving conversation being conducted by the White House that in this advisory capacity, it's really the heads of the various agencies that are making these decisions on laying off federal workers, taking it out of Elon Musk, and they hope creating more legal protection for those layoffs themselves.
Right, and the problem, though, Major, is that what a lot of these lawsuits that have stemmed from these Doge filings iterate, and especially across over about a dozen lawsuits aimed at Doge, is that especially the ones aimed at those employees who'd been fired by Elon Musk's Doge employees at these agencies, is that really nobody from the agencies knows who these people are. They usually come in and either take someone's badge away or they cut their access off. And, you know, I think when you think about what Trump has said about Elon Musk's role in this, you know, yes, Trump is the number one, person who makes final decisions of the White House, right? But the way that Elon Musk has essentially conveyed his role in this entire situation is that he's the one personally responsible for these layoffs. He and his team are doing X, he and his team are doing Y. And that certainly, at least by what the White House admitted last night, is not the case. A stark distinction between what is said at podiums and what is said in a court of law. That is a pattern somewhat familiar to those of us who've watched Donald Trump for many, many years. Jake Rosen, thank you very much. New York City Mayor Eric Adams' attorneys deny a quid pro quo was offered by the Trump administration in return for dismissal of
various federal corruption charges levied against the mayor. The mayor is facing mounting pressure here in New York to step down as Governor Kathy Hochul weighs whether or not to remove him. Anna Schechter joins me now here at the table. Anna, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. So what are the contours of this story? Where are things right now?
Well, tomorrow at 2 p.m., a federal judge, Judge Dale Toe, will hold a hearing. He's requiring the Trump Department of Justice and Mayor Adams' team to show up, and the Department of Justice has to explain their reasoning why these charges should be dropped. Now, there's a whole backstory to this. Let's go back to November 2023 when Mayor Adams' cell phone was confiscated as part of an investigation that led to September 2024 charges of corruption, bribery, a very sort of fanciful narrative of him getting lavish trips to Istanbul. And the allegation is that he was essentially currying favor with the Turkish government and allowing for them to build a consulate here without the proper permits. So multiple charges levied against him. Now, he has held firm, but what was extraordinary last week is the Department of Justice issued a memo mandating that the charges be dropped. Now, a Trump-appointed Southern District prosecutor resigned, even though she was not an ally of Mayor Adams at all, or really, she's not a resistance person at all, so to speak, self-proclaimed. But she resigned because she felt that it was so unjust. That this kind of quid pro quo was completely
inappropriate. What looked to her like a quid pro quo, even though the mayor has repeatedly denied that. And
she even noted in a footnote in her memo to Attorney General Pam Bondi, she wrote, in January, there was a meeting where Emile Beauvais was essentially... Deputy Attorney General was talking to members of her team and Adams' lawyers, and she perceived that Adams' team was saying, we will play ball with you. And
on immigration enforcement in New York City.
Exactly, if these charges go away. And it's for that reason, that meeting that she wrote about in that little footnote in the fine print, I think it all goes down to that. She just couldn't stomach it.
Separate from this judge and this hearing tomorrow, Anna, does the governor of New York have the power?
The governor of New York
to remove the mayor of New York City?
It's an extraordinary power that has never been used in the more than 230-year history of the state of New York. And so Governor Hochul has understandably been reticent to use that power because she has felt this could be undemocratic. Voters voted him in. Why not just wait it out in November, a few months away? There's another election. He's up for re-election. Why not let the voters decide? However, she changed her tune last night and said she is considering it. She held meetings with top Democrat leaders today from her Manhattan office. So we shall see. We didn't hear today if she's going to do anything. Our reporting indicates she wants to see what the judge does tomorrow and then make a decision.
Anna Schechter, thank you very, very much for breaking all of that down. Coming up, we'll dig in more on this story with former Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance. Up next, more on the drama from Big Apple. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. As we just discussed with my colleague Anna Schechter, a federal judge will consider the Justice Department's highly unusual motion to dismiss corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams at a hearing set for tomorrow. Cyrus Vance joins me now to discuss all this. He formerly served as Manhattan District Attorney. He joins us via Zoom from Paris. Cy, it's great to see you. Thanks for your time and your expertise. Many people looking at this situation regard it as something of a legal earthquake, that this is so unusual at so many different levels. Do you share that sense? And if so, what are you concerned about?
Good afternoon, Garrett. Nice to see you again. It is a very significant development and a significant moment in the mayor's case. I think that the judge, having ordered all the parties to appear before him tomorrow to make arguments and answer questions about what has happened, indicates the judge is going to do his job and carefully try to understand the facts before he makes a decision as to whether the government's motion is justified. I think the significance of the case has been talked about a great deal in recent days. Obviously, it's the mayor of the city of New York, one of the most powerful and influential political players in the United States. And the Southern District of New York, one of the most powerful and one of the best regarded U.S. attorney's offices in the United States. To have the Justice Department at odds with the leadership of the Southern District of New York, leading the acting head of that office to resign in a dispute over exactly why the government is making this motion is a big deal. Lawyers take an oath to follow the law and obey the rules of the court. And the acting director of the office indicated she could not do what the Justice Department asked her to do and be truthful to the oath that she gave when she swore herself in as an assistant United States attorney.
And more than half a dozen resignations from that office over this dispute. So it's not just one person who has that opinion. Cy, in your experience, directly or as someone who pays a good deal of attention to the machinations of the American justice system, can you recall an instance where the Justice Department issued an order like this and in it acknowledged that the order was not based on the facts of the case or the law?
I cannot. It's highly unusual. And I'm not sure what precedent there is. Obviously, we have had other times in history when the president and the executive has ordered United States attorneys or counsel for the government to do acts such as occurred in the Saturday Night Massacre years ago, where those lawyers have refused to do it. There's the analogy that we're seeing today. But really nothing quite exactly like this, holding the case over without dismissal of Mayor Adams. I can say that I know the next U.S. attorney who is going to be talked to by the Senate to take over, Jay Clayton, is someone I think who is very highly regarded in the legal community in New York, and I think is an extremely honest person. So whenever that review is done, I think and expect Jay will do it true to his oath that he's going to take if he becomes the next U.S. attorney.
Cy, real simple question. Can the judge block this?
Well, I think that the odds, as the odds makers who look at the federal law say that it's not likely, but what he's doing is he's taking a good, careful look. And that's entirely appropriate for the judge. If he decides to deny the request to dismiss the case, then the government can appeal that. I'm not sure the government wants to do that either. But it is a high-stakes drama with high-stakes players and lawyers all over the country, both in government and out of government, are watching very carefully about how this plays out. And as a former prosecutor, elected prosecutor, I fully understand the importance of lawyers, government lawyers in those positions, being true to the rules of the court, the rules of ethics, and to the oath that each of us swore, whether to the state or to the United States, to abide by the laws of the government and the United States.
To Cy Vance's point just now, this is not just a New York matter. The echo effects could last for quite some time. Cy Vance in Paris, thanks so very much.
Thanks, Garrett.
Ukraine's president is already preparing to reject United States and Russian talks to end the war there. How Zelensky's absence from the negotiating table might impact a path to peace. That's next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was wrapping up his first trip to the Middle East. There he met with top Russian officials, doing so in Saudi Arabia, to discuss the conversation about ending the war in Ukraine. Not formal peace talks, but trying to set that process in motion. Here is some of what the Secretary of State had to say after the meeting.
I came away today convinced that they are willing to begin to engage in a serious process to determine how and how quickly and through what mechanism can an end be brought to this war.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has noted that he's been left out of the process and cannot and will not accept any outcome from these talks that doesn't involve him. And Zelensky, notably, has postponed his trip to Saudi Arabia. That was scheduled to occur tomorrow. Ravi Agarwal joins me now. He is the editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. Ravi, always good to see you. So I don't know if did you have a chance to hear any of President Trump's remarks this afternoon at Mar-a-Lago?
I have not known yet.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
So when asked about the disappointment the Ukrainians feel being left out of this, he said, why are they disappointed? They should have ended this 3 years ago. That's a rough summary of what the president said, faulting the Ukrainians for not ending this war either sooner or talking about the barbarism committed in Ukraine, but not in any way, shape, or form indicating that there was an aggressor in this war. And, well, I'm told by the control room quite happily, Robbie, that we have a soundbite that sort of indicates what the president said. So let's listen to that so you can take a look.
Right.
Today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
They chose, Robbie, and I think that's the thing that is going to most aggravate Ukrainians and quite possibly alarm European heads of state.
It really will. And thank you for catching me up there. There's a lot of news these days. Look, this is exactly what Kyiv does not want to hear. This is exactly, frankly, what Vladimir Putin would have said, that none of this needed to happen, when in fact it happened because he wanted it to happen. And of course, Ukraine has gone through so much in the past 3 years for no fault of their own in this case. And in fact, they've put up a valiant defense that no one expected them to. And in many ways, Europe has risen to the occasion and helped them as well. So as it stands, European leaders and, of course, President Zelensky of Ukraine are just really confused and upset that, President Trump spoke with President Putin without including them, without involving them. B, that everything that seems to be coming out of the White House and this team right now seems to suggest that America alone can fix this problem, but Europe alone has to pay for it all. That really won't work for the Europeans.
And Robbie, is it possible that President Trump is doing a diplomatic head fake here, softening things up, saying things in a Putin-esque way to deceive the Russians, where, in fact, when they get into the room, they're going to drive a super hard bargain and make the Russians accept things that this rhetoric would suggest the United States isn't going to drive for? Is that possible?
I mean, it could be. And Trump all along has said that he is going to shake things up. He's going to bring a different approach to negotiations. And granted, maybe the way things were going needed to be shaken up a little bit. But what is confusing here is that Trump usually begins with a maximalist position by asking for too much and then giving some and reaching a middle ground. This, Major, is the opposite, where he is already talking about giving up more than would be palatable to the Europeans, to Ukraine. It's harder in any negotiation if you begin from a minimalist position. So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth last week said that it would be unlikely that Ukraine would get to join NATO. This is exactly the opposite of what the United States has been trying to push towards in the last year or so. So when you give up a little bit of negotiating firepower in the beginning, it's much harder to get it back at the end. So, your point of whether this is head fakery and jujitsu that could work out well in the end, maybe, but very, very strange.
And Robbie, you were at the Munich Security Conference, and for our audience's benefit, let people know what the reaction there was and what the new contours of conversation are going on in Europe about the relationship with the United States and maybe fortifying Europe for Europe itself and making different choices.
Yeah, so the Munich Security Conference, for your audience, is an annual security summit. It's been going on for about 6 decades now. It's a transatlantic summit mostly, which is attended by all the defense ministers, foreign ministers, spy chiefs, some heads of state as well. And so it was again this year, where all of them assembled and were expecting to really discuss the future of Ukraine. And they were looking forward to the top American envoy there, which in this case was Vice President J.D. Vance. He really shocked everyone when he didn't talk about foreign policy at all. And instead, he talked about how Europe actually had a problem from within. So not Russia, not China, but that its problem was that it didn't have enough free speech, or that it wasn't democratic enough, which really, I think, for the European leaders and the audience smacked of hypocrisy. They were very upset. And, to be very candid, immediately after the speech, many of them were saying that this was, in a sense, the last straw. This was a sign, if they ever needed one, that the United States was not looking out for European interests, and that Europe needed to figure out how to go it alone, how to not rely on the United States in the future because it was so unreliable. How to actually do that is a bigger question, because it would take at least a decade or 15 years for Europe to reorient its defense supply chains and to become self-reliant on the security front.
Editor of Foreign Policy Magazine, Ravi Agrawal, thank you very much, as always, sir. Coming up, Kash Patel moves closer to confirmation as FBI director. We'll ask our political panel about how his influence might change the FBI and carry out the Trump agenda. That's next. You're watching America Decides.
I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
Welcome back to America Decides, coming to you from New York City. That was a rare moment indeed when nominee for FBI Director Kash Patel broke ever so slightly with President Trump on President Trump's move to reduce the sentences for some of January 6th's most violent offenders. Tonight, the Senate is holding a procedural vote to advance his nomination to what looks to be ultimate confirmation. I want to bring in our political panel. Mara Gillespie is here with me at the desk in New York. Megan Hayes is joining us from D.C. Mara previously advised both former Speaker John Boehner and former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Megan served as the Director of Message Planning for the Biden administration. Okay, we'll get to Kash Patel in a second. But there was a headline-grabbing press conference this afternoon. I know, ladies and gentlemen, that's a redundancy involving President Trump. Every press conference tends to grab lots of headlines. He was asked, that is to say the president, about Elon Musk and potential conflicts of interest, since we should remind ourselves the world's richest man is also a multi-billion-dollar federal contractor, and there might be conflicts in overseeing all sorts of federal payments. Let's listen to the president.
Any conflicts, I told Elon, any conflicts, you can't have anything to do with that. So anything to do with possibly even space, we won't let Elon partake in that.
Possibly even space, a reference to SpaceX, which is a contractor with the federal government, a successful one. Many missions to the International Space Station and satellites. So, Mara, are you reassured by this, or do you think the self-regulating part of the conflict of interest, meaning Elon and the president, sort of police this themselves?
I have most concerns about what was the press conference of last week, where you had Elon Musk and his son behind the Resolute desk giving a press conference. And I think for MAGA supporters and those who are big fans of Donald Trump, they should be upset that the president was embarrassed in that way, and that Elon Musk took the questions, and that he was having what was a presidential press conference and running the show and making the president look weak. And for us as Americans, we should want our president to be successful. We should want him to be looking strong on the world stage. That, to me, when you have someone standing behind him and speaking like that, who's not an elected bureaucrat, who's not an elected official, that the people didn't ask to be there, and is speaking on behalf of the president when the president is sitting just idly by, is not a great look for us. And I think that people should be concerned and quite frankly, a little bit worried about what this means in the long term. He owns Twitter or X, he owns Starlink, and he owns SpaceX, as you mentioned. These are things to be concerned about.
Real quick on the politics of what Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, is doing. The extensive array of at least attempted federal layoffs. Do you think for Republicans in the House or Senate at the moment there is any political peril here?
Not yet, but when their constituents start to face the Medicaid cuts, or if the funding research for their particular family's health concerns becomes a problem and members start hearing from their constituents, then you're going to hear more from Republicans, especially in areas where a lot of Trump supporters are on Medicaid or rely on Medicare. These programs that need to be restructured. A lot of our systems are broken, and they could be used. They could use some reform, but that doesn't mean you slash everything. And unfortunately, the budget that was pushed out right now puts a lot of cuts on those programs. So I think that once you hear from those constituents who do get upset about the cuts, then members will speak up.
Megan, your take on what we heard from the president about Elon Musk and the potential, as Mara indicated, downstream political risk for Republicans?
Yeah, I think that the White House is trying to have it both ways with Elon Musk. They're trying to say he's not in charge of Doge, but then they're saying he's a special government employee. That's not the way it works. I worked in the White House in 2 different administrations, and special government employees have the same access as actual employees. So it's interesting that they are trying to have it both ways there, so that I think everyone should be concerned of what Elon Musk is getting access to and how much power that the president is giving him. In terms of the political effects for Republicans downstream, I do think that they're going to pay the consequences for this. If you just look at something like the cuts to USAID, we spend $2 billion just in the United States on in rural farms and communities. That's going to hit red communities. That's going to hit communities that are MAGA supporters, that are supporters of Donald Trump. And those members are going to have to answer to those constituents come in the midterms and in 28. So they will end up paying, they will have some impacts from that moving forward.
And Megan, do you think that when he is likely to be confirmed, hasn't happened yet, but Kash Patel as FBI director might be among the most consequential, high visibility appointments of this president?
I think it will be really interesting to see. I think that they are saying a lot of things in these hearings that are not going to come true. And I think the Senate is hoping and praying that they will have consequences when they are found to be lying. I don't think it's just Kash Patel who's not telling the truth in front of Congress of what they say that they are going to do and implement. I do think it will have long-lasting impacts. I think that he has no real law enforcement experience to be the top law enforcement of our, of our country. I'm sorry. And it's been proven that he's been impactful in trying to lay off people that are rank and file now before he's even confirmed. So it is very concerning, and I think that it will have real impacts across our country.
Mara, how do you assess what appears to be very solid Republican Senate support for Kash Patel?
That's the behind-the-scenes work that's being done, especially in the case of Tulsi Gabbard. Senators who had, rightfully so, genuine concerns and should be concerned about her.
And we're sounding wobbly. All stood in line
Very
except
much
Mitch
so.
McConnell.
Absolutely. They flipped or changed their tunes after having conversations with the Trump White House, with J.D. Vance. And so that, to me, says that they have more faith in Donald Trump and his administration than they do in the actual candidate themselves. And that's why they voted for her. They're not voting for her, per se. They voted for Donald Trump.
Or for Kash Patel.
They're not voting for Kash Patel. And this, for those who have real concerns, they're voting for Donald Trump. To show their loyalty, to show that they trust him, that they put their faith in him based on the conversations they're having behind the scenes.
And let's just be slightly cynical for a second. They don't want to pick a fight with the MAGA base or the social media echo chamber over any of these confirmation questions.
Well, and you heard that Elon Musk said he was going to spend over $100 million to primary anyone or challenge anyone who stopped or tried to stop the president's will.
There's that name again, Elon Musk. Mara Gillespie here at the desk. Megan Hayes in D.C., thank you very much.
Thank you.
He once ran against Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. Now developer Rick Caruso is using his influence to tackle rebuilding Los Angeles after the devastating wildfires. He joins us next. You're watching America Decides. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. As Los Angeles, and this is the only way to describe it, grapples on many different levels with the after effects, the devastation of last month's wildfires, the city, of course, is beginning the process to rebuild. You recall, 29 people were killed, more than 16,000 structures destroyed, and what could very well be the costliest natural disaster in American history. In this regard, I spoke with developer Rick Caruso, who has created a nonprofit to help rebuild the city, or at least expedite that process, and asked him off the top what right now is working and what isn't.
Let me take discourage first, if you don't mind, because
Sure.
we're sitting here going into the 6th week after the fire, and quite frankly, I don't think there's enough happening. And I think I share the frustration of so many people that have lost their homes and lost their businesses and lost, their livelihood, that they don't see more happening. So we need to pick up the pace of action in getting things cleaned up and starting to work towards getting people back in their homes. What makes me optimistic is so many people have leaned in. Just in announcing this nonprofit, we've got some of the best, the smartest people in Los Angeles and around the country that are giving their time and their talent with one goal in mind, the speed and safety of getting these communities rebuilt in Altadena and in the Palisades. So I'm heartened by that, and I think we're going to have some great success. It's going to take some time, but we're going to bend the curve and tighten the time frame so people get back to their homes.
You mentioned the speed, Rick, and it's not fast enough. Steven Soberoff, who is the appointed Chief Recovery Officer for the City of Los Angeles, has said rebuilding should be able to begin in 12 to 18 months. Is that a timetable you're satisfied with?
I think it could be tighter than that. I mean, 12 months is maybe realistic, 18 months is not realistic, but the way they're starting right now we're not getting a lot of cleanup going on. And so there's so much that needs to get done here, right? You've got to change the infrastructure in these communities. You've got to redo power lines. They need to be put underground. You've got to redo water mains, redo streets. You are rebuilding 2.5 times the size of Manhattan, to put it in scale. And so things have to run on parallel tracks. And it really, private enterprise, like Steadfast LA, that's brought in great private enterprise, has to form a public-private partnership with the city, the state, the county, and the federal government. Because if we leave it to government officials alone, or those who represent government officials, it's just going to take too long. So we need the ingenuity, we need the entrepreneurship, and frankly, we need this relentless follow-up every single day to make sure a lot of work is getting done and getting done in the right way, getting done efficiently.
And Rick, those who might have seen headlines might have come across something from Governor Newsom, cutting regulations, easing permits. Is that happening at the city level? Is it happening at the county level to your satisfaction? Are there things being missed in the regulatory climate?
I think all of that is good. I think the governor's doing some good things. I think the state and the county, the city are doing some good things. But here's where private enterprise comes in. It's not only about waiving certain things, it's about how do you expedite. So you need to get your plans approved. We're working with Amazon. We're going to be announcing this soon. But one of the things we're looking at doing is creating an AI model that reviews people's plans, so your plan check happens in a matter of hours and maybe days versus weeks and months. Those are the kind of things that we need to integrate right away that will allow construction to start sooner. So it's not only waiving things, it's how do you move things forward in a more efficient, faster way with all this great technology we have in the United States. Let's take advantage of it.
Rick, I know you've shied away from politics, but you did run against Mayor Bass in 2022. This also seems like a time for some tough love, some tough assessments about mistakes made before the fires and an immediate aftermath of them ravaging those two neighborhoods. I'd like your thoughts on that.
I think we have a lot of tough questions that should be asked and answered, and they should be now. You know, in typical career politician form, we're hearing, well, we have time to, figure things out and look back and figure out why things went so wrong. We need to understand that now so it doesn't happen again. And more that's coming out, there was massive failures of leadership, both at the elected level and the appointed level, that really cost people lives, their homes, and their livelihood. And I still say, as I said on the first night that this happened, most of this, if not completely prevented, could have certainly been avoided for the most part. And that is playing out to be true as we learn more about what happened in Los Angeles, sadly enough.
Rick, density and home building is going to be a big part of this. It has been said you are opposed to any rebuilding that adds density in terms of low-income housing. There are those within the city who want more low-income housing, and of course you know there's a statewide mandate to increase the availability of low-income housing. Specifically, where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I'm an advocate for low-income housing, and we're building low-income housing as a private company. So we're big advocates. What I've said is now is not the time to mandate it on the backs of people who have lost their homes and lost their communities. Instead of mandating it, what I've said to the local officials, put together an incentive and say if you build low-income housing, you get a density bonus. But if you mandate it, I think you create more problems, and you're also going to have a community very upset because it's going to slow down the rebuilding process. So let's give incentives for people to do the right thing. And I think everybody wins in that case.
Rick Caruso, my interest in this story will not wane. We will talk again, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Major.
Federal workers speak out about pending and real terminations, the effort to cut staff, and what those actually impacted have to say about all that's going on. That's next. You're watching America Decides. CBS News has learned the Office of Personnel Management has given federal agencies until tonight to issue layoffs in the Trump administration's efforts to downsize. Earlier today, I spoke with Natalie Brand about how people affected by these widespread cuts across the government feel.
I traveled to Ashburn, Virginia, about 40 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., as you know. This is an area where you will find a variety of political views, but also an area that is heavily dependent on the federal government. You have federal employees there, as well as government contractors, people who work for businesses that support the federal government. So I talked to more than a dozen people. Many of them didn't want to go on camera, but some of them did go on camera and shared their opinions, ranging from fear to some applauding what is going on right now. But one of the women I met, her name is Carol. She says her husband works for a company that's heavily dependent on contracts from USAID. So over the past few weeks, all of his projects have been shut down. And she said that his company has had to furlough around 70% of its staff. She and her friend Janet spoke to us about some of their concerns. Take a listen. This is Carol and Janet.
Everything just feels very indiscriminately done. There's no purpose to it. They're just slashing people without any kind of thoughtful consideration of what they do, what their job is.
I just don't understand how all this can happen and there's no control over it. And we've got people in the Oval Office now that aren't politicians, that have no right to be making these decisions.
And now the White House has said that Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, and Elon Musk are simply advising these federal agencies, but ultimately it's up to the agency heads, the secretaries, to make the final decisions on cuts, who's getting fired or hired. As for supporters of President Trump, I spoke to a number of them as well. And while they say that this is long overdue, that they like downsizing federal government, one Trump supporter did tell me he feels like the cuts so far have been made too abruptly.
I think it was a little quick. I think you probably could have rolled it out a little better. But I think overall it's going to be good in the long run.
I don't think it's too abrupt. Unfortunately, we do have to pull the rug out after a while. I mean, the spigot has got to stop. This has just been ridiculous.
Now, while in Ashburn, Loudoun County, I also met a government employee who didn't want to go on camera, but he described these cuts as, quote, fantastic. I spoke to someone else who couldn't go on camera. He had the opposite viewpoint, and he worries that the cuts of probationary employees, the workers who have perhaps less than 2 years of experience on the job, that will drive out a lot of young, high-skilled talent, forcing them out of government and taking their skills with them, Major.
And Natalie, I'm fascinated by the conversations you had because they reflect another layer of this story. The first layer, the one everyone's been most focused upon, understandably, is those directly impacted by layoff notices. But as you talk to people, there are those downstream who are part of businesses that support those people who are employed, who are also beginning to feel the echoing effects of these layoffs.
Absolutely. And right now, everyone's kind of on pause and wondering what will happen next, especially as these various legal cases, court cases, continue to play out. And another gentleman I spoke to, he was also connected to work with the federal government. He said he was an IT consultant. He worries about the economic impact in places like Northern Virginia, where there is such a heavy presence of government workers and those connected to the federal government.
Natalie Brand, excellent reporting. Thank you very much. That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow, right here from New York at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.